Okay, well, are we on, Martin Vach Archen? I hope you're well this morning. I had an excellent night last night. It's really good to be able to see you. I couldn't really see anyone last night. I was almost in a little corner and someone saying in my ears, "When did you last see your father?" You know. But anyway, a couple of housekeeping things just before we get started. As I say, there's no planned fire drill. If you hear the alarms, then go out the doors. You can see the exit routes there. Listen to any announcements. Pay attention to any staff who guide us out. Two other things, the two cars causing problems. Silver car SN58BXO has its lights on, okay? And a Volvo is parked in a yellow zone, must be yellow hatching or no waiting at all sign lines. SH59VZC, yellow Volvo. And as Neil Matheson said, the traffic wardens have been around every day, and if you want to come to a place that knows a way around the law, then clearly come to Oban and speak to Neil, because he's obviously got great experience. However, I had a great evening last night. As I said in my introduction, we may only be rural Scots, but we have world-class talent that was exemplified last night. I hope you've enjoyed plenty of meetings, meeting old friends anew. I do hope you have been to the exhibition space in Gordon Halls. If you haven't, please do that. There's a super range of exhibitions there. Last night I thanked those who were involved in the Fringe, who stepped forward to give us a very informative Fringe. That's been excellent, and thank you again for those who did that. Also those who led and hosted the visits. And my final personal report from last night is that my cajoling to get a drama out of John Watt actually worked, and that's good. So his reputation is intact. I also spoke, to move on to more serious things, I spoke last night encouraging us to be ambitious for our rural parliament, and we need to carry that ambition on through today and tomorrow. I also encourage those working in public bodies, NGOs and the like, to be receptive to ideas and collaborate with community folk here and vice versa. Very pleased this morning to have with us Cabinet Secretary Richard Lochhead. His vision and determination in getting this through Cabinet colleagues and the encouragement that he has given us right the way through this process has been hugely appreciated for the board, Emma staff and myself. It gives us a great feeling of confidence to have Richard Lochhead at our backs. And I mean that in the nicest way, of course. However, I'd left this until he was here this morning because I also want to express publicly the thanks, the support that we've had from Richard Lochhead's staff, in particular Lorraine McRae, Jodie Fleck, who are here, Alistair Pryor and Frank Strang. And Lorraine and Jodie have been with us right the way through here, and I describe them as uncivil civil servants, and I mean that in the nicest way. They've been very, very supportive right the way through. Again, Calmacher with us, thank you for your support, under Argyll and Bute Council. When Malcolm Rifkind, the Secretary of State who set up Scottish Natural Heritage, said at the launch of Scottish Natural Heritage that if it was not a thorn in his flesh from time to time, it would not be doing its job. So, if someone from, Ian Ross is here, there you are, Ian. Malcolm Rifkind, if SNH is not a thorn in his flesh from time to time, it would not be doing its job. So, the Cabinet Secretary, in encouraging us so far, will, I'm sure, encourage us as the rural community to be assertive. And as I suggested last night, this is not all about confrontation, but if we can develop ideas and better solutions with the public bodies and NGOs, that will give ammunition to the Cabinet Secretary to help him do his job, I believe, on our behalf. So, I'm very pleased indeed that Richard is here with us today, spawning this whole idea right the way through and into the future. I'm certain about that, and I would like to invite you to address us now. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, it's great to look out from here and just see so many people here from the length and breadth of Scotland. And of course, it's great to attend Scotland's first ever rural parliament and perhaps the biggest ever gathering of grassroots rural activists the country has ever seen. So I'm really proud, as Cabinet Secretary and someone who takes a close interest in many of the issues you'll be discussing over these days, to be here with you this morning. And of course, I'm told you're all very enthusiastic and keen, and I think if you're turning out for a ministerial speech at 8:30 in the morning, which is the earliest I've ever been asked to deliver, that is a sign that you are very keen and enthusiastic, so I'm encouraged by that. And last night was absolutely fantastic as well. By the time I got down from Parliament and got here, I wasn't here for dinner last night, but I know it went well, but I did make it in time for some of the culture and arts that was taking place last night right here, to listen to local young musicians from Argyll, and the ballet was there, and other acts, etc. And then, of course, it culminated with Karen Matheson, Donald Shaw, and James Grant from Love and Money, a band I went and saw in Glasgow about 20 or 30 years ago, on the stage here, which was absolutely fantastic. And I was just sitting there, and Karen Matheson was standing here singing A Fond Kiss at the end of the night, and I can only describe that as pure ecstasy. And I think she was singing it directly at me because I was just sitting there. So I really enjoyed last night. I'm glad I made it in time to see that fantastic display of the arts and culture and everything that's very special about rural Scotland. And of course, gatherings like this do demonstrate something we already know, and that is how privileged we are to live somewhere as vibrant and as diverse as rural Scotland, and indeed as Scotland as a country. So my job here, which I'm pleased to do, is to really set the scene for your really groundbreaking deliberations that are now taking place over the next couple of days, and see this Parliament deliver on its manifesto commitment in our government, because I've been personally championing that for many, many years, and it's great to see the rural Parliament now becoming a living, breathing reality. It marks an exciting point as we join the family of rural parliaments from across the whole of Europe, sharing with millions of others the recognition of the importance of our rural voice and the pride that we do have in our rural way of life. And rural parliaments have proved themselves to be a fantastic vehicle for giving communities a strong presence and a voice on the national stage. So that's exactly what I'm expecting from the rural parliament here in Scotland, and I'm sure that will be true for Scotland as well. This meeting is the culmination of a tremendous amount of hard work by a lot of dedicated people, and John referred to that briefly as well. So my thanks, my personal thanks, go to the Voluntary Board of Scottish Rural Action, the members of the Rural Parliament Advisory Forum, and to the community groups up and down the country who have all worked tirelessly to spread the word about the benefits of having this kind of initiative. Most importantly, of course, my thanks go to all of you, without whom there would be no rural parliament. And there are people here from all walks of life, from the grassroots across rural Scotland, and there are many diverse experiences and views, no doubt, on the way forward as well. So it's a real rich collection of human resources here at this rural parliament this week. In all my time as Minister for Rural Affairs, I've been totally awestruck by the fantastic energy and creativity of the people that I meet when I travel around rural Scotland. I'm also, of course, frustrated at how difficult it can be to harness all of that energy I come across and engage with the vast array of people involved. And of course, I've just explained what we have here today, and of course, there's many other thousands of people out there across rural Scotland as well. So for the last few years in this post, I have been constantly searching for new and radical ways to take the pulse of grassroots Scotland. So I do think we've now found, hopefully, the answer to that. Rural Scotland covers 94% of our land area and is home to 1/5 of our population. And those of us who live and work here are aware of the many advantages that can bring. The natural resources that we are blessed with, our land, our sea, our climate, they all underpin many of the great and world-class sectors that we have in this country, be that farming, or fishing, or food and drink, or renewables, and many other sectors as well. And some say, of course, that Scotland is a very lucky country because we've won the natural lottery. And I don't think I disagree with that. I'm sure you wouldn't do as well. So we must do our absolute utmost to protect and utilise the amazing assets we do have in this country, and particularly in rural Scotland, the natural assets and the human assets as well. So some of these issues are being discussed later today in the workshops, and of course I'll be here hopefully for part of that. I'll be here for part of today. I know many of you have been involved in setting the agenda for this event online and via social media or at local events like the one I was lucky enough to attend in my own constituency in Elgin. And I and some of my ministerial colleagues will, of course, be participating in the workshop sessions later today and the discussions tomorrow as well. I think it's really important we all take advantage of the opportunity to have a genuine debate about the issues that really matter to rural Scotland's future. We have to take this opportunity to influence each other, to generate ideas and develop solutions. And the video that was shown last night that many of you saw, interviewing people from various rural communities throughout Argyll, and one gentleman said, of course, talking about the challenges of the future, he said that the solution, of course, is to get the ideas that allow us to move forwards. And he was talking about that from his own personal experience. And again, that is what this event is about. And what better place to have this debate taking place, because this award-winning community-led leisure centre is just one example, of course, of how people living in rural communities can affect real, lasting and positive change. This is a community hub that provides a huge variety of facilities, including, of course, the water flumes. Even more importantly, though, the choice of the venue for this week was all about the community choosing somewhere that ensured the money spent over these 4 days would be reinvested locally and support the local economy. And many of you will have been out and about yesterday, getting a taste of the rich diversity on their own doorstep here and many of the community initiatives in and around Oban. And many of you, of course, had the opportunity to visit Mull. And I hope the weather was good. I was actually there for my holiday just the week before last, and had a fantastic time. So it's an amazing place. And there, of course, we have the Anne Roth Community Enterprise Centre, which is a hub for community and business activity, and the home also to the Mull Abattoir. And that alone provides a crucial service to local farmers and allows locally produced animals to be slaughtered and eaten locally, with all the benefits that brings to the wider local economy. So it's great, again, to see all these little bright lights of innovation around rural Scotland thriving and doing well. This confirms what I thought when I met with staff in Bond last year and discussed the Swedish Rural Parliament about how the best solutions come from grassroots action, where local people develop their local solutions to local problems. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Staffan for all his time and support that he's given to get us where we are today. And 20 years ago, Sweden had a vision for something new then, something different, a gathering of rural communities on a mass scale. And that vision was realised when the very first Rural Parliament was born, and with it the birth of a rural movement. So our friends in Sweden have never looked back, and that's what this Rural Parliament is all about, channeling ideas, connecting people, acting as an information hub, and ultimately being a catalyst for change. But in all our deliberations, we must focus on the greatest asset of our rural areas, which is, as I said before, the people. Although you will no doubt debate a number of challenges facing rural areas today, you'll also hear about many, many success stories. Sharing both good and bad experiences enables us to learn what has worked well and avoid making the same mistakes. I've organised some events over the last few years. This is the biggest rural event, but I've been struck by how sometimes if you get people in the same room from different parts of the country that have faced the same challenges in their own communities, and then they share experiences, and some people can explain to other people how they overcome some of the obstacles they face locally, and then other people can take away that experience and make it work in their own communities. And I see that in my own constituency in Murray, and I see that in my travels around Scotland. So that sharing of knowledge, skills and expertise is really, really important. It can help communities build confidence, resilience, and get the outcomes they want to see for their future. And to help support that today, I'm also pleased to announce the doubling of funding for the Scottish Rural Network. We're going to increase the funding to £4 million over the next 6 years, which is around, as I said, double what it is at the moment. So we're very keen to support that agenda and that kind of interaction in the months and years going forward. That will greatly enhance the network and enable us to support initiatives such as the Rural Parliament and other similar initiatives in the times ahead. We have to make sure we can support and underpin rural development by sharing all that good practice and expertise. And I really want the network and the Rural Parliament to work closely in partnership to make the ideas that you're going to be discussing this week a reality in the future. And there are many, many examples of good collaboration. The network helped run the fantastic Celebrate Rural Scotland photo competition for this event, and you'll notice the 6 wonderful winning photographs on display outside the hall. It's also helped to promote the numerous local rural parliament events that have been taking place around the country so far. So whilst innovation, ideas and energy will come from all of you and people like you, the government is absolutely committed to help providing the tools to capture all that's good and spread the word as far as wide as possible. But our commitment won't just stop at these kinds of things. We're absolutely committed as a government to take bold action across a range of policies for the benefit of rural Scotland. I know that amongst the many issues being discussed over the next couple of days, land reform may be at the forefront of your discussion. As you know, as a government, we are currently considering the proposals made by the Land Reform Review Group in May and are already taking forward a number of their recommendations. I believe this nation's land should be used to benefit the people and the environment of this country. Our communities and environment will thrive when communities and the people of Scotland have access to land to fulfil their aspirations and needs. And things are changing. The range of community ownership has widened in recent years. A report published by Community Land Scotland clearly shows that community ownership models work and work well. The turnover of the communities featured more than doubled, and direct employment increased fourfold. The ones featured as well also increased their contributions to local economies by £2.5 million. So these outcomes demonstrate the power of community ownership. We want more communities to become stronger, more resilient and more independent through the acquisition and management of their land. That is why we brought forward the Community Empowerment Bill, which will improve community and partnership working and provide a legal framework for communities to take ownership of land and buildings. I can't disclose what's going to be announced in the next few weeks. There's lots of things happening in Scottish Parliament and at Scottish Government level over the next couple of weeks and soon thereafter. But what I can say is that land reform is an ongoing process. There's a range of work streams underway at the moment that are going to result in very radical outcomes. I can also say that I think land reform is going to dominate much of Parliament's activities over the next year or two, and no doubt beyond. But the timing for the first Rural Parliament could not be better, because Scotland is changing. In the build-up to the referendum, debates were happening in town halls, community centres and street corners. I recognise many familiar faces in the audience who were participating at the forefront of many of those public meetings around Scotland. But the public showed an eagerness to take an active part in shaping their future, and that, of course, took many of us by surprise, pleasantly amazed and surprised by the enormous, unprecedented public engagement and participation in our country's future. And what is equally amazing is that these discussions are continuing, and we consider, as we consider how best, for instance, to devolve more power to Scotland. So this Rural Parliament must build on this enthusiasm and take an active role in the ongoing debate. We need to have a coherent and complete set of economic and social levers to help tackle many of the complex issues you'll be discussing in relation to rural poverty or economic growth in rural Scotland over this couple of days. For instance, with a greater say in competition regulation, we could ensure a fairer deal for rural communities and essential services such as parcel delivery or high-speed mobile phone or broadband coverage, enormous issues in rural Scotland. And indeed, last night, again, in the video from Argyll interviewing various people from around the local communities, I remember the lady saying that the internet was a lifesaver for rural communities, particularly in relation to employment opportunities. So now we have the Smith Commission underway and is currently considering what additional powers should be controlled in Scotland. The Scottish Government, of course, has argued, as you won't be surprised to learn, that these powers should be extensive, and they should be guided by the presumption that devolution should take place unless there are clear reasons where responsibility should remain reserved. And I know many of you, and some of you will be involved in other organisations, have made really strong representations to the Commission, so I'm delighted that you're taking that opportunity to influence Scotland's future. This is a historic moment in our constitutional journey, and we should not lose sight of the many things that we're already doing and the powers we do have, but we still have the opportunity to shape the future. But we do have a lot of things that are underway and happening at the moment. And of course, just in the last few days, we've seen the Health Secretary announce an additional £40 million, for instance, of funding for our health services, empowering GPs and primary care professionals to develop initiatives that address challenges in workload and health inequalities, specifically targeted at rural areas and deprived areas. But we can and we should do more. So I want to work with all of you to foster new ideas and new ways of working to ensure that rural Scotland thrives. That is why this Rural Parliament is so important. Your enthusiasm, your commitment, your drive is absolutely vital to its success and, of course, to achieving a successful rural Scotland. We have to build on the momentum generated through the referendum and embed that notion of participatory democracy. This, I believe, will help us build a real, genuine rural movement for Scotland. The vision, I'm sure we share it. We want to see a thriving rural Scotland, a great quality of life, a thriving rural economy, communities where young people in particular feel they've got the choice to live and work in those communities and continue to build their lives there and are not forced to leave, and where these communities are empowered to shape their own destinies and their own future. So I wish you very well in the coming day and 2 days, and I look forward to working with you all very much, hopefully in the future as well. And just to close, I would just say that, again, the young musicians last night on the stage were outstanding, and they culminated with young Laura MacLeod singing the Brand New Road, the song Brand New Road, which I thought was outstanding. So it's an appropriate title for the song, and it's an appropriate thought to leave hanging in our heads this morning as well, a brand new road, because this is the first ever rural parliament in Scotland. It's the biggest ever gathering of rural activists in Scotland, and we are embarking on a brand new road. So good luck with that journey, and I'll support you, and the government will support you along that journey in the times ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few minutes for questions. Any questions, sir? There's roving mics floating around, but they're not quite here yet.
Thank you. Hi. Hello, Mr. Lochhead. Thank you for your speech. It was very interesting. In particular, you mentioned participatory democracy. Now, would you be prepared to commit here and now to give Scotland's 1,200 community councils, at the very minimum, the same powers as England's parish councils?
Well, at the moment, we have the Community Empowerment Bill going through Parliament in terms of addressing how to empower communities, and I gave some examples of how that will happen. Community councils clearly have a big role to play in the process going forwards. I think Scotland is now entering a debate about how to promote participatory democracy. I think the coming years will have the future of local democracy at the heart of that debate, and community councils clearly will be influenced by the outcome of that debate, the powers they have, and how we devolve power down to local communities. So I can't speak here for my colleagues in government and give any commitment to exactly what will happen with community councils in the future. But what I can say is I am confident that the debate in Scotland is changing for the better, and that the whole concept of how we promote participatory democracy at local level and in terms of rural Scotland in particular, how we deliver more local democracy will be, centre stage. And I think it's a very exciting time.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Just a second. Sandy, could we deal with that gentleman there, and then the mic can go over here. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Michael Halliday from the STFA, Scottish Tenant Farmers Association. Does the Cabinet Secretary believe that the Ag Holdings Review will have any chance of improving the fortunes of Scottish tenant farmers if there's no joined-up thinking with the earlier recommendations from the Land Reform Review Group?
Well, the good news is there is joined-up thinking with the outcome of the Land Reform Review Group, and as the person who's chairing the Agricultural Holdings Review Group, I can assure you that is the case. And clearly, for those of you who may be less familiar with the workings of the Agricultural Holdings Review Group, it's all about increasing the amount of let land in Scotland for agriculture, and particularly to make sure there's opportunities there for new blood to come into farming and food production in the future, because over recent decades there's been a sharp decline in the number of farm tenancies in Scotland. That is not a unique Scottish problem, it's replicated across Europe, but it's a really important issue for Scotland's future, and we do have some unique characteristics that are perhaps causing that decline in Scotland. So we are looking at some radical action under the review group. I think will be warmly welcomed by the agricultural community, and particularly clearly tenant farmers. So the review group's been improving a lot of tenant farmers and their role and their rights, but it's also about the concept of freeing up let land as well. And where that relationship doesn't work, we're looking clearly at solutions that are quite radical in terms of what you do where there's a breakdown in relationship between landlord and tenants and things are not going well. So I think it's going to be a landmark review, and we'll make sure the thinking is linked. Clearly, land reform encompasses all many different concepts and issues, whereas the Agricultural Holdings Review Group is about let land, making sure there's land available for letting, which is a big part of thriving agriculture in Scotland.
Thank you very much, sir.
Is it on? Oh, right, sorry. My apologies. I'm not a technophobe, as you can probably imagine, but we all live in rural areas, and one of the issues that are top of our list of concerns is broadband and mobile technology. We're working hard to try and improve that. I know we all are, but under the devolved powers, I gather that the Scottish Government is no concern at all about expanding the control of the telecommunications over the UK to Scotland. Can you explain why the Scottish Government doesn't want to get involved with that? Is it new to you?
Right, okay, well, I'm not quite sure that's the position, but I'll clearly, connectivity is incredibly important for the future of rural Scotland, and we have some evidence that people influence where they live by the connectivity. So clearly, if you want businesses like the lady again that was in the video last night who says she writes books and she has to download books, but she can't do it from a rural community easily because of the lack of broadband width, that's a crucial factor in helping the local economy. These issues are reserved. The regulation of telecommunications are reserved. The Scottish Government, because of these issues becoming increasingly important in the 21st century because of the lack of action at UK government level, we finally got a way forward with the UK Government, as you know, a couple of years ago, and now there's an initiative underway in Scotland to roll out broadband into the hard-to-reach communities in Scotland. Hundreds of millions of pounds are being invested in that, and the Scottish Government are contributing, tens of millions of pounds towards that initiative. And as a result, many communities are being connected now to broadband that weren't before. And I can speak as someone who represents a largely rural constituency that is the case. So there's a Highlands and Isles initiative underway, and there's a South of Scotland initiative underway as well. Our view in terms of where these powers should lie is that these powers should lie in Scotland, and that's why I was saying in my opening remarks that only where there's a really cast iron case for these issues to remain reserved, everything else in Scotland should be devolved. Telecommunications will be a battleground, I'm sure, with the Smith Commission and the constitutional debate, but clearly we've had a situation in past years where the UK government regulating on broadband coverage has picked percentages. So it said, for instance, I can't quite remember the exact figures, but roughly 80% of the population in the UK will get super fast broadband by X date. Unfortunately, within the 20% that's not including that, it's X percent of Scotland. So Scotland fulfills the little percentage that's not part of the UK target. And we've suffered from that for decades and since broadband's come into play from that UK perspective. So we've now got this agreement with the UK government to try and change the way they do these things, and likewise for mobile phone coverage as well. And that's why the powers should lie here, because sometimes we've got the priorities but not the powers, and the powers lie elsewhere where they've got different priorities. And that's the conundrum we have with the constitutional arrangement we have at the moment. So believe me, we'll fight for maximum power over broadband and connectivity.
Thank you. Final question, sir. No lady is going to ask questions. Please. Go.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Lorraine Frew from Residents Association in a rural village in southwest Scotland called Canonby. And in fact, we know that at least 10 tenancies have been recently lost. I'm not quite sure the farming tenancies because there are proposals by the landowner to extract onshore gas in fact 20 odd sites around our rural village, and the proposal is I can see we've been following the debate about the gas being extracted so that subsequently we will then be subjected, according to the landowner's proposals, to open cast mining and to underground coal gasification across a very large area. And my question is about what the Scottish Government can do to stop that.
Okay.
The industrialisation, effectively, of a huge swathe of rural Scotland.
Okay. The issues you mentioned clearly are very important, and clearly in terms of how government and local authorities approach that, is we don't want rural Scotland simply to be a playground. It's got to be, we want to be a thriving economy, and therefore we need development in rural Scotland to create the jobs and the economy. So we also have to strike that balance, and that's quite difficult at times. There's a couple of issues in your question. There's the issue of open cast mining, the issue of unconventional gas extraction, which is a big topical issue at the moment. The government has already issued up-to-date guidance to strengthen protection for communities in relation particularly to unconventional gas. And as you can imagine, with this becoming a more pertinent debate, we're keeping a very close eye on where our policy should go in the future in relation to fracking and unconventional gas. But I think our position in Scotland is much more proportionate and sensible than perhaps what's being adopted in the rest of the UK in relation to fracking. So we are keeping a close eye on that. I don't have all the answers to these questions. I think, this is the purpose of the Rural Parliament. If you feel strongly about these issues and you feel the system at the moment is not giving enough protection or not taking into account the right issues, this is, the forum and forums like this that we need to hear from. So all I can say is we're very conscious of these issues. We have brought forward guidance to strengthen protection in terms of buffer zones, etc., to do with unconventional gas. And if there's more to be done, this is your opportunity to speak up and convey the message. Okay?
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary, for that. It's really good to get direct responses like that. Just on the very last matter, the lady from Canonbay, that's the kind of thing to bring up in the open space and get groundswell support for that sort of thing. But thank you very much indeed for your responses.
Thank you.
So I think you heard it here first, folks. If anyone's organising a ministerial conference, if you want to catch a Cabinet Secretary off guard, ask him to speak before 9 a.m. in the morning, and you'll learn things like, Karen Matheson had me in ecstasy and things like that. Okay, so there. So not really trying to draw too much of a theme on this, but if anyone wants to tweet, could I just give you the code? Cafe Atlantis. And the passcode are all the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. They know how to make things complicated in Oban. So Cafe Atlantis, all the numbers 1 straight through to 0. Cabinet Secretary will be around for the rest of the morning. I'm sure there'll be opportunities to catch his ear. I guess many folks will do that. Very well known in Thinking Scotland is Carol Craig, the Chief Executive of the Centre for Confidence and Wellbeing. And her canon is surprisingly well detailed on the Centre's website. There's a huge amount of detail there, which I found really, really enjoyable. And community confidence is the key to what we are doing here. We have so many exemplar projects in rural Scotland that it's sometimes really difficult to understand why we feel so bad about ourselves and doubting. Now, Carol has analysed the Scottish character far more than most, and for that reason, the board believe that she is absolutely the right person to be our keynote speaker this morning. So would you please welcome Carol Craig.
Okay, good morning. Let me start by saying there's a very nice line in a book by R.F. Mackenzie, an acclaimed book called A Search for Scotland, which often flits through my head. And he says at one point, the Scottish cultural revolution would begin in the country places. And I quite often think about that line because I think he's right. I think in many ways, the significant changes in Scotland are going to come from rural areas. And that's why I'm so delighted to be speaking here today at this first Scottish Rural Parliament. Now, I'm going to talk primarily about well-being rather than confidence, and in rural areas. But I want to start by saying why I'm so committed to highlighting the great work that's happening in rural areas. And I think one of the reasons why I've probably come to prominence at the moment for rural issues is because I'm editing a series of books called Postcards from Scotland, and there's a leaflet on your table if you're interested in just looking at what they are, because what this is doing is really saying to Scotland, we need to start changing the way that we live and the way that we think, because of major environmental issues apart from anything else, and because our culture really isn't sustainable. So far, we've published 7 books with Argyll Publishing, and they're short books. It's one of the attractive things about the series is that they're 2 hours, they're about a 2-hour read. They're about 120 pages, and so they are incredibly accessible. And what's happening in rural areas has actually been really at the core of what we've been doing in a lot of the books, or we've been picking issues that are of incredible significance to rural areas. So, for example, in After Now, the first book in the series, which is on health, the very visionary thinker Phil Hanlon, who's a professor of public health, looks at some of the health challenges for Scotland, along with Sandra Carlyle, one of his research assistants. And he's looking at modernity, how there are major problems in the way that we're living, and that's translating into health issues. And he comes up at the end with 2 kind of projects that he particularly favours. And one of them, the most significant of the 2, is the Well Project in Nairn, which is a major and important way of dealing with health in patients in a really innovative way. So that's the first book in the series, and already rural Scotland is leading the way. The third book in the series is called The New Road, and I think it's relevant. We've already heard The New Road. Now, I was very, very keen to have something in this series that was charting the fantastic community work that was happening, particularly in rural Scotland, that we are not reading in the papers. Papers are declining, they don't have the budgets to send people out, they're not covering it. So unless you live in some of these areas with these fantastic projects, you often don't know about them. But I had an immediate problem with this because there's no money in small books. I didn't have a budget to commission a journalist to write it up. And then I suddenly realized that I was living with a semi-retired journalist, Alf Young, who used to write for the Herald and the Scotsman, and who was very good at actually taking something that could be quite dry and making it interesting. And I don't know that I would have interested him in it if it hadn't been for the fact that our son, Ewan Young, was at that point working in the Ullapool Development Trust. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if they did a father-son thing? And it's the road, but it's not that dystopian road of a man and his son going on a horrible journey. It's actually an inspiring journey. And so we talked about it. Ewan planned the journey. Alf did most of the writing. And they did an 8-day road trip around Scotland. Not the whole of Scotland, and they could easily have written 3 volumes of this. They were very aware of this. They started in Dunbar, they finished in Neudark, they went to 15 projects, 2/3 of them, maybe even more, in small town or rural Scotland. And they were blown away by what they saw in most of these areas. The commitment of people, the innovation, the fact that this is the way in which we're going to have to live more in the future, with people doing things about environmental sustainability, social enterprise, but also people doing things more for themselves. I'm very delighted to say, of the books in the series, that's the one that's proved most popular, because people are inspired when they read about the kind of things that people are doing. There's also a book in the series which is very, very relevant to rural Scotland, called Scotland's Local Food Revolution by Mike Small. And this is an analytical book that looks at our dysfunctional food system, but also looks at a lot of the things that are happening in Scotland. When he proposed that title to me, I thought he was exaggerating. By the end of it, I was really convinced that there was a lot of very significant things happening in Scotland around local food. A lot of fantastic projects, initiatives, cafes, restaurants, and many of them are in rural Scotland. There's one on allotments, might not be as relevant to rural areas as urban areas, but actually there's a wonderful introduction to it which sets out why something like allotments are contact with a green environment, community gardens and so on, are so good for people's well-being. And the latest book in the series is Schooling Scotland, Education, Equity and Community by Danny Murphy. Now, Danny was so inspired by the new road, he decided he wanted to do his own road trip. And he went round about 10 projects in Scotland. And again, at least half of them, if not more, are in rural Scotland. But he couldn't then quite fit it into a book of 120 pages and then say anything else. So he's done it as an online tour journal. And one of the projects is about Room 13. And I'm sure many of you do not know about this wonderful education project called Room 13, which started in Cowell Primary School outside of Fort William. It's a creativity and enterprise project that has now spawned international projects in Turkey, in Nepal, several in Africa. This is a hugely significant thing that happened in a small rural school as a result of the teacher and the pupils. So, Room 13, do look at it because it's genuinely inspiring. So there's no doubt that rural Scotland, with a fraction of the population, we heard Richard Lochhead say a fifth of urban Scotland, is exceeding expectations when it comes to innovative and important work. This needs to be recognised and celebrated, and this Rural Parliament is incredibly well placed to do that. And even just the Rural Innovation Awards last night, I learned about projects that I didn't know about, and I'm sure that would have been true for you as well. So there's a really important role because of the decline of the media, we're not getting access to that information, and we need it. We need to be doing it for ourselves. But I want to move on and talk a bit about well-being, because rural areas, particularly in Scotland, are also leading on well-being. And these are no idle words, because we've got confirmation from that from the UK's government decision to measure well-being, often called in the press Cameron's happiness measures. Now, there have been 3 annual surveys taking 165,000 people a year throughout the UK and giving them questions on what's called subjective well-being. So these are questions trying to measure people's happiness, their life satisfaction, whether they feel their life is worthwhile. This is often reported in the papers as whether people think they're worthwhile, as if it's a kind of self-esteem question. It's not. This is about whether you think your life is worthwhile, and it's about how meaningful you think your life is. There's a subtle difference between the two. And the 4th question relates to anxiety. It's asking people on a scale how anxious they felt yesterday. Now, the results show that over the 3 years, of the 4 constituent parts of the UK, Northern Ireland has the best subjective well-being. Scotland second, significantly ahead of England and Wales. Results have varied a bit from year to year, but for 2 of the 3 years, the area of the UK with the best well-being ratings and these subjective well-beings across the board was Elanshire, Orkney and Shetland. Also performing well, the Scottish Highlands, Dumfries and Galloway, particularly on happiness and low on anxiety, the Scottish Borders, Perth and Kinross, Moray and Aberdeenshire. Scottish rural areas are doing very well when it comes to well-being. The last results in September, Northern Ireland actually demoted Scotland from the top. They took 4 of the 5 top places, with a place in Suffolk taking the other one. And it was places like Antrim and Fermanagh that came top. It's maybe fortunate. Jean Urquhart, many of you will know, the MSP, and myself were thinking about putting together a book with her as editor called Lessons from the North, which would have been exactly looking at why the north of Scotland was leading the way in well-being, but actually maybe it's just as well we didn't make progress on it since it's now the north of Ireland. Other places that do well are Anglesey, the Isle of Wight, Cornwall, East Devon, Somerset and Suffolk. Now, this doesn't mean that there are no people in rural areas who are languishing are not doing well in terms of well-being. Of course there are. And you will know this. You will know that there are people who are isolated, who don't have access to services that would make a difference to them and so on. But proportionately, there are fewer of them in rural areas than there are in urban areas. The places with the lowest life satisfaction and happiness and the highest anxiety, in general, are urban areas like London, Slough, Glasgow, Liverpool. Edinburgh, which scores high on life satisfaction, actually scores quite high on anxiety. Some of the most unhappy areas are South Ayrshire, the Welsh Valleys, places of industrial decline. And other areas with low well-being are those with urban deprivation. But what's interesting about this is it's well-off urban areas that do not come out particularly well in well-being. And you wouldn't not, given the values of our culture, you wouldn't necessarily have predicted that, because we're always being told that the route to happiness is money. The area in the UK with the lowest well-being, particularly high anxiety, often have the highest disposable income. Now, what's interesting about these figures is that the top performing areas are not only rural, but they're mainly coastal, so that the islands are doing particularly well. So, what is it about living in these areas that is so good for people's well-being? Now, there's been a certain amount of speculation, there's some indicative research and so on. The most obvious answer is they are made up of people who tend to score high on well-being. White people tend to do better than people from other ethnic groups. Married people tend to score better than single or divorced people, and people who are employed tend to score much better than people who are unemployed. So it could be, it's just a combination of these are the people in rural areas, but it's not just that. There are other factors as well. So what are they? Now, I'm going to start with my own hypothesis, because there is no definitive answer. There's only speculation and a bit of indicative research. My own hypothesis is that these places are quite literally the furthest away from materialist culture and values. Now, I'm particularly interested in this because my book for the series is called The Great Takeover: How Materialism, the Media and Markets Now Dominate Our Lives. And if we think about materialism as the pursuit of money and what it can buy, image and appearance, fame, popularity, and status, these are materialist values, and they dominate so much now of Western culture, and they are very, very prevalent in the UK. They are the values of celebrity culture. They're what you're getting all the time from the media. Now, what's really interesting is there's extensive research which shows that the more people pursue these values in life, the worse their well-being is. Materialist values make people more unhappy, dissatisfied, and anxious. It's not difficult to see why, if you think that your life is dependent on getting the latest mobile phone or fashions or whatever, you're not going to be satisfied for very long because someone's going to get a better model. And dissatisfaction is just the whole part of the system. It's what advertising thrives on. So if that's your agenda in life, you can see why your well-being's not likely to be very good. The other thing is, these values take us away from the things in life that really do make a difference for well-being, particularly relationships, a sense of meaning and purpose. It's these sorts of things that really matter for people's well-being. So if these are your values, you're really unlikely to be staying in a rural area because you're not going to be able to satisfy them very much. Now, of course, there are other reasons as well. I think probably a contact with some culture that's different from that. And I think we saw that displayed last night with the Gaelic choir. People in rural areas have often got access to different culture and contact with them from these kind of materialist cultural values that are so dominant. And that could be incredibly beneficial. But there are other reasons, and one of them is contact with the green environment. There's a man called Theodore Roszak, who's considered the father of what's now called the eco-psychology movement, and there's a lovely quote from him when he says, "When highly stressed people are asked to visualize a soothing scene, Nobody imagines a freeway or shopping mall. Rather, images of wilderness, forest, seascape, and starry skies invariably emerge. There's now a lot of psychologists and thinkers arguing that contact with the green world is imperative for people's well-being. There's a best-selling author who wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods, a guy called Richard Louv, who talks about nature deficit disorder. There's numerous empirical research projects now which show that if people have contact with nature, they are more likely to lead a healthy lifestyle. Walking in a green environment, to sum up then, because I'm running out of time, to paraphrase R.F. Mackenzie, rural areas will provide much of the catalyst for making Scotland better. Not only are you already involved in doing a lot of these things, but you're leading the way on well-being. Scotland has to pay attention to what you're doing. The Rural Parliament will provide a great voice for you to do that. I hope you use it, and you use it loudly. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Carol. Carol will be back to answer questions just very, very shortly. Carol's a really captivating speaker, and I mentioned her canon being available on the Centre website, and there are innumerable films of Carol and other speakers there, and I would commend the book series, which is sitting on the table over here at the moment. We'll shortly hear from Anna-Lee Kanna, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Estonian village movement, Kodukant. And I had the privilege of attending the Estonian Rural Parliament last year and found Estonia a really impressive place with a population of 1.3 million, just a generation away from the Soviet era, and people were still learning how to write project plans. The President, the Minister for Agriculture and the Presiding Officer of their Parliament attends the Rural Parliament, mixes and mingles.
Get some guests from Estonia, don't apologize about your weather at all. We are used to have weather continuously, 100 days without sun, but we don't apologize if we have 2 continuously week minus 25 in wintertime. You are welcome to Estonia. This is our slogan, touristic slogan. So yesterday's weather was normal November in Estonia, and in Scotland I feel myself like at home without umbrella. I don't like bring umbrella all time. What I not used yet is the Scottish pronunciation, and I am really apologize if you turn to me and tell something and I just at first say sorry, and on the second time I understand what did you say. But I apologize, the Estonian accent. I really hope that you understand what I will and try to tell you. I will tell you the story of Estonian rural parliaments. Yes, we had a lot of them, already 10, but the great grandparents of the rural parliaments in Europe are, of course, Swedish. Hello, Staffan, wherever you are. And Staffan could tell you all story about Estonian rural parliaments, because if the first Estonian rural parliaments took place, I was a young student and I didn't participate in it. But now I got the responsibility to organize them already. So my presentation telling a story about Estonian rural parliament, and I set it up as an apple tree. From roots to top of the tree, from grassroots level to upper level. On the next slide, I start from the roots level with first one. The most important resource, if we're talking about village movement at all, is local Estonian people. The village people living there, the village association, we have a lot of them. I didn't put there some numbers, but in Estonia there is 4,438 villages. yes, the member of Kodukant must know the numbers, and I should say that our ministers already learned this number too. We have almost half of them have already some kind of activities, village association. In Estonia, we have village elders system. It's voluntary person to taking responsibility to make advocacy of his or her village. And in Estonia, we have approximately 1,600 village elders. And of course, it's important to having good relationship with your neighbors. It means that on the municipality level, there are good cooperation between villages, common project, and having a voice on the municipality level. The next point of the roots on the next slide is our members. Village movement Kodukant, the explanation, the strange word Kodukant is in Estonian, and it means home area. Word kodu is home. And in Estonia we have 15 counties, and the organization Kodukant have the roots in each county, in all 15. And these county Kodukants, as we call them, the county organizations, consisting village associations and individuals as well. So it means that the network with hundreds contacts, 1,000 contacts actually, tens or hundreds or even 1,000 projects and initiatives makes us quite great. Even Estonian government already understood it after 17 years. But they are learning, as John said, once we had a very young prime minister. We have not the same, but our prime minister is 34. It means that we, as a strong organization, should teach them sometimes. And the third slide about roots is very important groups during Estonian rural parliaments. There are county delegations. Yes, our rural parliaments established a little bit different way, not available list of participants, but as we have the organization in each county, they collect and bringing on right people and interested people, and the Estonian Rural Parliament means that we have 15 county delegation with 20 participants in each. And our rural parliament taking place every second year. So we coming a little bit higher now and can talk about Kodukant as it's very, very good to talk about umbrellas and watering can in Scotland. But we are the umbrella organization and the watering can in the same time, actually. What we must do, what we want to do as an office of Village Movement is to collect different ideas and communicate these ideas for bringing them to the field of rural parliament. Raise topical themes if we got the good ideas. Of course, prepare event with one county member. Why? Because our Estonian Rural Parliament traveling around all over Estonia, it means that each rural parliament takes place in different county. We have already done it 10 times and we have 15 counties. It means that we have 4 left because 11th is already selected and working at home now. Our duty is find and apply funding. It's not so easy, but somehow very fun work lobbying the member of parliament or government. Of course, we have pre-discussions with politicians and key persons. And in the same time, dealing with the high-level discussions, in the same time encourage villages and rural people to bring their needs, their ideas, their voice public. The second And the next slide, very shortly about the Estonian Rural Parliament, what it is. It is 3 days event, as yours, and it brings together villages, different organizations dealing with rural development, national and local representatives, of course, and usually international delegation. All the group or delegates of the rural parliament are approximately 400 participants, 300 from the different counties and 100 with guests and other delegates. The event aim is, of course, to discuss the issues and looking for solutions, not only complaining that this is bad and this is wrong, but our aim is find out the solutions. We can't wait or hope that somebody, Estonian president or government, takes all the responsibility. There is a lot of things what we ourselves can do if we really want to. How we do it? Of course, the forums, workshops, idea hunting visits with small groups and split up to different places, village houses, enterprises, farms, etc. in the area we stay. And living library like a method is quite popular, and we had a challenge for the next rural parliament on next year that we using or asking to be living books our parliament members and members of European Parliament elected from Estonia. Let's see what happens then. Of course, the cultural activities and fairs, the social communication should be part of this big event. And last but not least, the emotional opening ceremony. Why emotional? As John already mentioned, the greeting speech by President and President of Parliament, but the opening ceremony is the time where we announce the honorary title of the Village of the Year. We have this kind of competition in Estonia, and chairman of this jury has been 4 times the president of Estonian Parliament. We are very glad to have her in this position. And now the 3 next slides talk about results of the rural parliament. At first, proposals, tradition and even law about the Estonian rural parliament. It's not the state law, it's law taken and voted by village movement ourselves. The tradition is that the Estonian rural parliament to formulate the proposals to 3 different levels, to 3 different groups. At first, to Estonian parliament and government. And the second, Estonian local municipalities, the association of local municipalities, and some of them get directly some suggestions and proposals. And of course, Estonian Village Movement Kodukant, ourselves, we get acting lines for next 2 years from the parliament. And all proposals based on the results of discussions, workshops, etc. The next result could be some declaration or statement. It depending all the time of the situation in rural life, rural development in Estonia. And the rural parliament might submit the declaration. For example, in last time we submitted statement to Ministry of Agriculture because we were not very satisfying how they dealing with common agricultural policy and the local rural development action plan before the new period in European Union. I can say that we quite succeed because they put our 2 proposals to this action plan. So, and the last fruit or part of GREW, the results of rural parliament, is the summary and press releases we produced. because we using the rural parliament as a method and a tool in same time to proceed advocacy of villages, village associations, rural people. And we spread the results with any different way. New ideas, proposals goes, as already mentioned, to government, parliament, and of course to press. And we have good cooperation with some of our big newspapers. Sometimes, especially last time, there was very big interesting by Estonian national television about the results and about process at all. And of course, the printed version about results and summary of Estonian Rural Parliament in Estonian and English. And of course, already mentioned or virtual life in Estonia, the e-version. We even call our country e-Estonia. We have e-government, we have e-elections, so we don't need to go somewhere and make some signs on the paper. We can vote to even our parliament via smartphone. But yes, if somebody asks us, we talk to each other too sometimes, not only chatting, sitting on the same table. And the last news about the country is that from January, if you are really wanted and wanted to be related to Estonia, you can apply and be an e-resident of Estonia. This is something new, really, and people who want to use it are usually interested to make business in Estonia, and e-residency make that you don't get Estonian residency legally, but you have some rights to using the e-materials, e-platforms in Estonia without any traveling to Estonia, because believe me, it's not so easy from Auburn to Tallinn. I know. I made already some emergency landing in Warsaw between, and that was really tricky to came here. And after 10 rural parliaments we had last year, we published the brochure 10 rural parliaments in Estonia. So we are going now, approaching to the 11th Estonia Rural Parliament on next year in 7 to 9 August 2015. And I don't say that you all are welcome, but some of you are really welcome. And I can promise that in August there is maybe a little bit warmer than now there. And maybe there is even sunshine, because one of our traditions is that a lot of time we spend outside. That's the reason why we organize this event in summertime, because we like be outside, especially in short summer, and you can come and try how it happenings there. Thank you very much for your attention. I really hope that the Estonian accent was a little bit understandable, but the slides helped me a little bit. See you during these couple of days, and I wish you successful and fruitful very, very first rural parliament in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna-Lee. I'm going to take this idea of e-residency back to Egg. So there you are. So if anyone wants to sign up,